Teresa Bier, kidnapped by Bigfoot. Teresa Ann Bier was born on April 16, 1971, to Shirley and David Bier. Shirley had a mental illness, and David had been in the Vietnam War. When Teresa was about 3 years old, she was severely injured, ending up in the hospital. Shirley had wrapped Teresa's leg around the crib slats and twisted until it broke. She also beat Teresa, breaking several ribs. At that point, social services intervened and took Teresa and her sisters away. That was also when Teresa's parents split up. Teresa was then placed in foster care, and Sylvia Pierce, a friend from church, took in Teresa and her sister Vicky. Teresa lived happily with Sylvia for a few years until her father wanted her back. David had married Margie Richmond, who had daughters of her own and had once been married to Shirley's half-brother, John Richmond. David petitioned the court to get his little girls back and was awarded custody. Teresa and Vicky became reunited with their father, moving to Southern California, where both he and Margie worked as janitors. Allegedly, Margie would lock her refrigerator and just sit there and eat her lunch and not feed her kids anything. Teresa eventually returned to Fresno and stayed with her great-grandmother for a little while. Teresa's uncle John Richmond, who also lived in Fresno, was well known to Fresno law enforcement. Cops knew him as Blind Johnny. He fenced stolen property, and he actively began to pursue custody of his niece. John had 2 young sons when he took in Teresa. His new wife, and presumably the mother of the young sons, was reportedly a prostitute. He also had a 17-year-old girlfriend, Tammy, who often stayed over at his place. Teresa became very, very withdrawn. She would stay in her room and keep to herself. Johnny would make Teresa babysit his little boys, often causing her to miss school. They lived in a filthy apartment. At one point, Johnny's wife took Teresa to Southern California with the boys, where she turned tricks while Teresa watched the kids. Johnny began molesting and raping Teresa, and he would let his friends do the same. In June 1987, Teresa had nearly completed her freshman year at Central High in Northwest Fresno. At age 16, she was a year or more older than most of her classmates. Teachers saw Teresa as slow and immature, and she was placed in special education classes. A man named Russell Skip Welch pretended to take Teresa to school, but both Skip and Teresa had other plans. They allegedly decided to go on a camping trip in the Sierra Nevada mountains and look for Bigfoot around the Bass Lake area. Skip was 43 years old and a meth addict. He was obsessed with Bigfoot and would often take girls into the mountains. Before Teresa went on the camping trip with Skip had taken a young girl named Michelle on a previous trip. She was warned by friends not to go with him, but she did anyway. Michelle was smart enough to bring 2 big male friends with her. It's a good thing, too, because Michelle thinks she was drugged. She was screaming that someone was going to kill her and almost fell off a cliff, but one of her friends saved her. By mid-morning, the school called Johnny to inform him that Teresa was not at school. He told them she was homesick. He would later explain that he lied because he preferred to handle the matter on his own. Before they headed to the mountains, Skip and Teresa had made a stop at his daughter, Chandra Welsh's place. Skip was having trouble with his beat-up 1976 Chevrolet Monte Carlo. At 9:30 p.m., when Teresa still was at home, Johnny finally called the Fresno police to report her missing. On Friday, June 5th, Skip's car was spotted parked by a trailer park near the town of North Fork, a small foothills community that served as a kind of gateway to the Shut-Eye Peak region of Sierra National Forest. Skip had driven down from the mountains to the residence of his friend Dorothy Davis, who lived right behind that trailer park. Days later, Dorothy told authorities that Skip was extremely upset and possibly high on something when he showed up. He told her about a girl that he had left up in the mountains. A satanic group had gotten control of the girl and had physically changed her into something all white-looking. A few weeks after Teresa was reported missing, John received a threatening phone call from a young female. She told him that Skip was packing a pistol and wanted her to tell him, "If you continue to make trouble for him, you will have more trouble from him. Even your kids can get hurt. And tell the police that Skip has taken Teresa to school, dropped her off, and some unknown blonde girl had picked Teresa up." 2 days later, Skip was picked up by the police at his mother's house in the Sunnyside neighborhood of Fresno. He claimed that he had dropped off Teresa at school, but the police weren't buying it, and he was arrested. Back at the police station, Skip claimed that Teresa ran away from him on June 1st, but eventually stated that Teresa had been forcibly taken by Bigfoot. He said that she'd be happier there because they were super intelligent beings. Skip agreed to show authorities where the campsite was that he and Teresa allegedly stayed at. He led them to a small grove of trees at the meadow's edge along Brown's Creek. At the inner area of this grove there was a smoldering fire among the heavy layer of pine needles that appeared to be somewhat damp. This smoldering burnt area was approximately 3.5 feet wide by 8 feet long. There were these blankets that were put up, and they were in a certain formation. There was a camera, a purse, an off-white bra, and a t-shirt with animal caricatures with the word "Party Animals" underneath. There were Polaroid photos in the purse of the countryside, along with a picture of Welch playing guitar as he was sitting by what appeared to be the blanket that was in the grove area. There were also pictures of Teresa. The campsite where all this was found turned out to be staged by Skip. From the topography in the photos, the local deputies were able to guess that the actual campsite was 20 miles away, possibly in Ghost Canyon. Even though he allegedly lied about the campsite, both the meadow and the canyon were searched. A helicopter that was searching for any clue or sign of Teresa's whereabouts spotted something on the hillside above the Brown Creek's camp. It turned out to be a blue shirt that belonged to Skip, and it had meth in the pocket. One of Skip's relatives told authorities that Skip had told them about a rock at Ghost Canyon where a girl needed to be tied up as a sacrifice to the devil. Skip was charged with Teresa's abduction, but the case against him was dismissed due to lack of evidence in October 1987. He was also offered a deal for extremely light sentence if he were to confess and show them where her body was. He refused, sticking to his Bigfoot story. Searches of the Shut-Eye Peak area produced no clues as to her whereabouts. Teresa has never been found, and foul play is suspected in her case. At the time of her disappearance, Teresa was 5 foot 5 inches tall and 110 pounds. She was last seen wearing a white t-shirt, blue jeans, and lace sandals. She also had brown hair and hazel eyes. Teresa's upper front teeth protrude. She has a surgical scar on her lower right leg due to the childhood fracture. Her nickname is Sam. If you have any information, no matter how small, please contact the Fresno Police Department at 559-621-2541, and Teresa's case number is 8736264. In March 1998, Skip died at age 54 from severe coronary artery disease.